5 years together, and on the night I thought he'd finally propose, my fiancé stood up in front of everyone and said I wasn't good enough for him. Not beautiful enough. Not smart enough. Just ordinary. The entire bar went silent, every eye on me, as if my love, my loyalty, my 5 years of sacrifice were nothing more than a cruel punchline. But here's the part he never expected, that public humiliation became the spark for my rebirth. Because the night he tried to break me was the night I learned how to rise. Before I take you into this story of betrayal and justice, don't forget to subscribe to her Betrayal Stories and hit the bell. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been told you weren't enough? Your story might be the next one we share. The night at O'Malley's was supposed to be magic. 5 years together, and everyone whispered this was the night. Brandon even wore the blue shirt I gave him. He almost never wore my gifts. His friends Tyler and Josh kept nudging him, grinning like kids with a secret. And then I saw it. A velvet box in his pocket. My heart leapt. This is it, I thought. But when he pulled the box out, he didn't drop to one knee. He smirked, spun it in his hand like a toy, snapped it open under the bar lights. The diamond sparkled. And then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, Lauren, I'm not sure you're worth this. The room went dead silent. Tyler chuckled. Maybe if you hit the gym more, huh? Josh added, or learn to cook something better than chicken pasta. Dozens of eyes turned. My 5 years of loyalty had just been auctioned off as a cruel joke. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, voice shaking but steady. You're brave tonight, Brandon. It takes guts to humiliate the woman who paid your rent when you lost your job. And Tyler, remember who comforted you when your girlfriend dumped you? Josh, who covered for you when you were too drunk to work? The bar shifted. Gasps, whispers. Brandon's smirk faded. You all love a show, I said. Fine, here's the truth. Brandon isn't a man. He's a coward who needs an audience to break up with someone. And you two? His cheerleaders. For the first time that night, he looked small. I grabbed my purse and walked out. Outside, the cold air slapped my face. Tears burned, but my father's words echoed like a lifeline. If someone doesn't value you, don't waste your life proving them wrong. Walk away with your head high. That was the night everything began to change. If you were me, standing on that sidewalk with your dreams shattered, would you walk away? Or would you rise? Tell me in the comments. And before we dive deeper into this story of betrayal and rebirth, don't forget to subscribe to her Betrayal Stories and hit the bell. Your story might be the next one we share. The morning after that humiliating night, I stood frozen in front of the mirror. My swollen eyes, red and raw, stared back at me. The girl reflected there looked like a stranger. Older, broken, emptied out. But beneath the exhaustion was something else. A flicker of relief. At least the mask had fallen. The Brandon I had defended, forgiven, sacrificed for, had revealed himself to be nothing but a selfish boy playing at love. Knowing the truth, however, didn't soften the pain. By Monday, whispers spread through the office like wildfire. Did you hear? He humiliated her at O'Malley's, said she wasn't good enough. He pulled out a ring and mocked her with it, in front of everyone. I kept my head down, pretending to focus on my work, but every overheard word pierced deeper than a knife. Even Margaret, his mother, called me that night. Her voice wavered. Lauren, I'm sorry, but you know Brandon. He's impulsive. Just give him some time. Time? I whispered, the word bitter on my tongue. He destroyed me in public, Margaret. And you want me to wait? The silence that followed told me everything. Her loyalty was sealed to her son, no matter what he did. Sophie came by later in the week, hugging me tight. I don't know why he did it. You were the best thing in his life, Lauren. Her words comforted me for a moment. But as weeks passed, even Sophie stopped visiting. It was easier for them to protect Brandon's pride than stand by me. But Brandon wasn't finished. He called one evening, his voice smooth with arrogance. Lauren, don't take it so personally. I just realized you're not the one. Better to be honest now than waste more years, right? My chest tightened. Honest? You humiliated me like a circus act, Brandon. That's not honesty. That's cruelty. He chuckled, low and mocking. You're too sensitive. That's why it wouldn't work. You take everything to heart. I held my breath, refusing to give him the satisfaction of an argument. Then came the dagger. You'll never find someone like me again. You should be grateful I gave you 5 years. My body froze. Grateful? For humiliation? For betrayal? The words roared in my head, but my voice stayed calm. Goodbye, Brandon. And I slammed the phone down. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. A week later, I spotted him at a cafe. He leaned back in his chair, smirk painted across his face while a younger girl clung to his arm. See, Lauren, he said, loud enough for others to hear. I moved on. You should try it sometime. The girl giggled, scanning me like I was some outdated model. Heat rushed to my face, but I forced my legs steady, walking past with my head high. My hands trembled long after, but I refused to let him see. That night, flowers waited at my door. A note dangled from the bouquet. Still friends? B. The audacity. I tore the card in two. The cruelty didn't stop with him. His friends joined in. Tyler sneered on social media. You should have known your league, Lauren. Brandon was always too good for you. Josh piled on. She's just bitter because she lost the jackpot. Every insult wasn't just aimed at me. It was designed to erase 5 years of sacrifice, turning me into a joke. If you've ever been betrayed and painted as the villain of a story you never asked to be in, you know the fury. The helpless, choking rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to disappear. But most of all, I wanted to prove them wrong. That's when I found it. The letter my father had left me before he passed. Tucked in an old box, the paper yellowed, his handwriting strong and steady. My dearest Lauren, the world may measure your worth by shallow standards. But remember, your value lies not in their judgment, but in how you carry yourself. If someone does not cherish you, do not waste your life begging for scraps of affection. Walk away and walk tall. Tears blurred the words as I read them again and again. My father had understood the weight of dignity. His voice reached across the years, handing me the weapon I needed, perspective. For days, Brandon's words echoed in my head. Not good enough, ordinary, grateful. Each sting slowly sharpened into resolve. Then came the breaking point. At the grocery store, reaching for a carton of milk, I overheard 2 women by the apples. Isn't that the girl Brandon dumped at O'Malley's? One whispered. Yeah, poor thing. Guess she wasn't pretty enough. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the carton. My humiliation had become public property, dissected between apples and carrots. That was the day I swore. No more tears. If they wanted a story, I'd give them one. But it would end with me standing, not broken. And so, my transformation began. I cut my hair, a sharp bob, like slicing off dead weight. I joined a gym, not for Brandon, but for me. Every rep, every drop of sweat was anger transmuted into strength. I cleaned out my closet, tossing away the pastel dresses he'd once praised as sweet. I replaced them with tailored blazers, bold colors, heels that struck the floor like declarations. At work, people noticed. Lauren looks Different. She seemed stronger. Even Sophie texted, "You look amazing. Brandon doesn't deserve you." But this was only the surface. Inside, something bigger was stirring. I applied for a job at Morrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious PR firms in the city. For years, I had doubted myself, convinced I wasn't good enough. Brandon fed that insecurity, always reminding me to stay realistic. But now, fueled by my father's words, I sent my resume. A week later, I got the interview. The morning I walked into that gleaming office, dressed in a crisp navy suit, my smile steady, I felt like I was stepping into a different life. For the first time since that night at O'Malley's, I believed I could rewrite my story. So I ask you, if you were in my shoes, mocked and diminished after 5 years of loyalty, would you sink into bitterness or find the fire to transform yourself? Because I chose transformation. And soon, Brandon would learn just how ordinary I truly was. After 5 years of dating, hearing him say, "I'm not sure about marrying you," didn't just end us, it rewired me. That sentence trailed me into elevators and 2 a.m. kitchens until I decided it would be the first line of my new chapter, not the last line of his. Morrison and Associates rose like a sheet of glass. I smoothed my navy suit and felt the weight of my father's letter in my bag. Walk away and walk tall. Today, I was walking toward. Ethan Carter's handshake was exact, not patronizing. In an office of cedar and skyline, he asked crisp questions: failures, pressure, what I do when a client panics. I didn't apologize for my scars. I told him about late-night fires I'd put out, budgets I'd pulled back from the brink, how heartbreak had trained me to stay calm under heat. He watched me a beat. "You've been underestimated before, haven't you?" "Yes." "Good. People like that know how to fight clean." His hand extended. "Welcome to Morrison and Associates." The latch clicked behind me and something in my chest unknotted. Then I worked. Days took on the rhythm of rebuilding bone. I said yes to the hard files, learned fast, kept notes in black ink. Clients began asking for me by name. For the first time, I was seen not as someone's girlfriend but as the woman who could take a mess and make it clean. Nights were quieter. Anger burned blue, contained, focused. Then a folder slid across my kitchen table. In a stack of old papers, I found a draft contract Brandon had once asked me to proofread. Back then, I skimmed for commas. That night, I read for patterns. 2 numbers in a column didn't agree. A clause referenced a fund that mirrored another fund. Why were there 2 mirrors? I should have shut the folder. I didn't. I marked margins, sticky noted pages, and slipped the packet into a plain manila envelope. I didn't know what it meant yet, only that it smelled wrong. I wasn't looking for a weapon, but I had just found a match. Work drew me forward. Networking nights became a carousel of glassware and first names. At a gala, I stepped from the car in a black dress that fit like conviction. The chandelier threw onyx light. Brandon was at the bar. I felt him before I saw him, the pressure change before a storm. His eyes scraped over me, his mouth tightened. He came closer with a whiskey he didn't need. "Lauren," he said, voice thinner than he wanted. "You look different." "Better," I said. "We should talk." There's nothing left to say. I turned. My pulse drummed. He didn't vanish. Flowers at my door. An email signed "Still Friends?" A message. "No one will ever love you like I did. Come back before it's too late." Too late had a timestamp. O'Malley's bar. I closed the laptop. Sophie called in tears. "He says you ruined him," she said. "He's drinking more. He won't stop saying your name." I was sorry for her, but I understood. He wasn't in pain. Because he lost me. He was in pain because he lost control. One late night, Ethan and I drafted a crisis plan at the long glass table. The city was a scatter of embers. He set down his pen. "You're good at this," he said. "But there's jet fuel under the hood. What's driving it?" I thought about lying. "I was humiliated in public by someone I trusted," I said. "I'm not trying to hurt him back. I'm making sure my life is defined by something else." "You don't need to prove anything to him," Ethan said. "If you want the world to see who you are, make it obvious. Don't show them the wound, show them the strength." Permission granted. I began to prepare. I checked dates in Brandon's draft against public filings. I learned which shells legitimate companies never use. My notes stayed factual, not vindictive, stored in a folder named something boring, Budget 2019. Every step away from him felt like stepping into a room with better air. At events, I listened more than I spoke. I built an inner circle that didn't gossip but delivered. Brandon hovered at the edges, hungry for a glance I wouldn't give. When a man loses your attention, he often tries to take your peace. Margaret called again. "He's unraveling," she said. "He blames himself. He blames you. Could you meet him? Just once? To clear the air?" I almost said no. Then I realized. The meeting wasn't about air. It was about weather. You don't stop a storm by pretending it isn't there. You put up shutters and decide which windows stay closed. The restaurant was low-lit wood and quiet tables, a place where voices stay contained. Brandon arrived late, shirt wrinkled, eyes rimmed red. He tried on his old smirk. It didn't fit. "You've changed," he said. "No," I answered, folding my hands. "I stopped letting you define me." His jaw set. "So you think you're better than me now?" "I have always been better," I said evenly. "I just forgot for a while." He blinked. For once, there was no line ready. In the small silence that followed, jurisdiction shifted. I didn't hate him. I simply recognized he no longer had authority in my life. We talked logistics, returning a couple of books, telling mutual friends to stop triangulating. He tried one last door opener. "No one will love you like I did." "You're right," I said, standing. "No one will ever love me like that again." I left him with the check and a mirror. Outside, evening air slid cool across my face. The crosswalk clicked to walk. The city's rush braided around me like music. Back home, I set the manila envelope on my desk and turned on the lamp. The pages inside were only paper, but I understood their use. Not to destroy him, that was never my job, but to draw a boundary, to keep myself safe. I organized my notes, saved the file, and closed the laptop. The sentence that had once chased me, "I'm not sure about marrying you," felt like a door I had already walked through. The next time Brandon saw me under bright lights, it wouldn't be at a bar, and I wouldn't be the one shrinking. The world was about to learn the difference between humiliation and clarity. So was he. The gala of the year arrived, hosted at the Grand Regency Hotel, a glittering event where the city's elite gathered under chandeliers that sparkled like frozen rain. And for me, it wasn't just another night of business networking. It was the stage I had been waiting for. I walked in on Ethan Carter's arm, not as someone's plus one, but as his trusted associate. My sleek emerald gown shimmered with each step, the color chosen deliberately. Bold, commanding, impossible to ignore. Heads turned. Conversations hushed. For once, I didn't shrink under the attention. I owned it. And then, across the room, I saw him. Brandon. He was leaning against the bar, drink in hand, his suit slightly rumpled. His laughter was loud, forced, the kind of noise a man makes when he needs the world to believe he's still in control. But the moment his eyes landed on me, the laughter died. I saw it in his face. Shock, regret, maybe even fear. Whispers spread quickly. "Isn't that Lauren?" Brandon's ex? She looks incredible. What was he thinking? That's her? She's with Ethan Carter now? Every whisper was a dagger slicing into Brandon's pride, and I felt no guilt. He stumbled forward, forcing a smile as he approached. Lauren, he said, voice tight, you look different. Better, I answered smoothly, echoing the word I'd once used. This is what happens when you stop carrying dead weight. Gasps flickered around us. Brandon flushed crimson. The night should have ended there, but fate handed me the perfect moment. The host invited key business leaders to the stage, and among them was Ethan. As his associate, I joined him. Standing under the spotlight, I introduced our firm's latest campaign, a crisis management project that involved financial transparency and corporate accountability. As I spoke, my eyes found Brandon in the crowd. He looked pale, because he knew. He knew the documents I had once proofread years ago, the ones that revealed his shady dealings, were now part of the very case our firm had quietly taken on. And I wasn't just Ethan's assistant. I was the one who had pieced together the puzzle. After the presentation, Brandon cornered me in the hallway, his voice low and panicked. You knew. You've known all along. I met his gaze without flinching. I read your contracts, Brandon. I know about the missing funds. I know about the false reporting. Did you really think your arrogance would go unnoticed forever? His jaw clenched. You wouldn't dare expose me. I stepped closer, my voice a sharp whisper. Expose you? You already exposed yourself the night you humiliated me. All I've done is give the world a front row seat. He staggered back, as if I'd struck him. The true climax came days later. At a high-end restaurant, Brandon confronted me again, this time, drunk, desperate, flanked by a few acquaintances. He shouted across the room, his words slurred but cruel. Don't act so high and mighty, Lauren. You begged for me once. Tell them. Tell everyone how pathetic you were. The restaurant went silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward us. My pulse quickened, but I stayed calm. I stood, my heels clicking like gavel strikes as I faced him. You want them to hear the truth? Fine, here it is. I turned to the crowd, my voice ringing clear. This man once told me, in front of a bar full of strangers, that I wasn't good enough. That if I were prettier, maybe he'd marry me. He mocked me with a ring, turned my love into a circus. And tonight, he wants to rewrite that humiliation as my shame. Gasps, murmurs. Heads shook in disgust. I faced Brandon again, my voice steady as steel. But here's the thing, Brandon. Your words don't define me. They never did. And now, everyone sees the truth. You're not a man. You're a coward. Drunk on your own ego. The room erupted in whispers. A manager approached, flanked by 2 security guards. Sir, you need to leave, the manager said firmly. Brandon sputtered. You can't. This is... But the guards each took an arm, escorting him out as his protests echoed. The sight of him being dragged from the restaurant, once again humiliated before a crowd, was the very justice I had longed for. And I didn't have to lift a finger. His own actions buried him. The aftermath was swift. News spread, not just about his drunken outburst, but about his shady business practices. The whispers I'd once overheard in grocery stores were now headlines in financial journals. Local entrepreneur under investigation for fraud. His mother, Margaret, called me in tears. Lauren, I don't know what to say. Brandon has lost everything. I thought he'd grow out of his arrogance, but now even his career is gone. I sighed, my voice calm but firm. Margaret, I never wanted his destruction. I only wanted my freedom. What he's lost, he lost on his own. The final confrontation came when Brandon appeared at my office uninvited. He looked broken, His suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his swagger gone. "Lauren," he whispered, "please, I've made mistakes. But you were the only one who ever believed in me. Take me back. Help me fix this." I studied him for a long moment. The man who once mocked me with a ring was now begging for scraps of dignity. Slowly, I reached into my purse and pulled out a small velvet box, the same one he had once toyed with at O'Malley's. I set it on the desk between us. This? This is the ring you used to humiliate me. It's not a promise. It's not love. It's a reminder of everything you destroyed. He stared at it, trembling. "Lauren, please." I stood, my voice sharp and final. "You don't need a girlfriend, Brandon. You need a project to fix your broken ego. But I am not your project. Not anymore." With that, I walked out, leaving him alone with the ring, the very symbol of his downfall. If you were sitting across from the person who once humiliated you, watching them crumble under the weight of their own arrogance, would you give them mercy? Or would you give them the silence they deserved? The morning after I walked away from Brandon for the last time, I stood by my apartment window, sunlight spilling across the floor like a quiet blessing. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because he was gone, but because I had reclaimed myself. I brewed coffee slowly, savoring the aroma, letting silence replace the chaos that had defined so much of my past. My phone buzzed with notifications, articles, texts, messages. Some were from old acquaintances who had seen the headlines about Brandon's collapse. Others were from women I barely knew, but who had followed my story from whispers and gossip. One message stood out. "Lauren, I don't know you well, but I saw what happened with Brandon. I just want to say, you've given me courage. I've been in a relationship where I feel invisible, and watching you walk away reminded me that I deserve better." Tears filled my eyes. For so long, I thought my humiliation had been nothing but shame. But now I realized it had become something else, a testimony. My scars had turned into a map for someone else's freedom. I didn't gloat in Brandon's downfall. That's the thing no one tells you about revenge. Once the dust settles, it's not about destruction. It's about release. Brandon lost his reputation, his career, and the pedestal he had built for himself. But I didn't need him ruined to feel whole. What I needed was a boundary, a line drawn in permanent ink that said, "You cannot cross here anymore." When I returned the ring that night, it wasn't just a gesture of rejection. It was closure. The same object he once used to humiliate me became the symbol of my liberation. Weeks passed. Life settled into a rhythm I hadn't known before. At Morrison and Associates, I thrived. Ethan trusted me with bigger projects, and colleagues who once looked past me now sought my input. I was no longer the woman hiding behind someone else's shadow. At home, I decorated my apartment with things that reflected me, not the sweet, ordinary girl Brandon once molded. Bold paintings, stacks of books, plants that bloomed under sunlight. Each detail whispered, "This is my life, my space, my voice." Sometimes Sophie called, updating me about Brandon. He had moved back in with their mother for a while, drifting between odd jobs. I listened with compassion, but no pity. Everyone chooses their path, and Brandon had chosen his arrogance until it consumed him. The final thread unraveled one afternoon when Margaret herself came to see me. She sat across from me at a cafe, her eyes weary, her voice heavy. "Lauren, I owe you an apology. I defended my son for too long. I thought love meant excusing him, protecting him. But I see now. Love without accountability isn't love at all." Her honesty touched me. "I don't hate Brandon," I said quietly. I just refuse to let him define me anymore. That's the difference. She reached across the table, taking my hand. Thank you for showing me that. I only wish he had learned it sooner. Life has a way of circling back with lessons you don't expect. Months later, at another gala, I stood under the same chandeliers, this time fully at peace. I wasn't waiting for anyone's validation. I wasn't scanning the crowd for old ghosts. Instead, I was laughing with colleagues, sharing ideas, building connections. And when someone asked, "Aren't you Brandon's ex?" I smiled and replied, "No, I'm Lauren Carter, and I stand on my own." That night, I finally understood. Healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about transforming it into a foundation for the future. To you, watching this story unfold, I ask, have you ever been told you weren't enough? Have you ever given everything only to be discarded, belittled, or humiliated? If you have, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not defined by those moments. You are not the sum of someone else's cruelty. If you're still waiting for someone to value you, let me say what I wish I had heard years ago. Walk away and walk tall. The lesson I carry is simple, yet powerful. Respect isn't given by blood or by years or by empty promises. It's earned through love, kindness, and the courage to see someone as they truly are. Brandon taught me what disrespect looks like. My father's words reminded me what dignity feels like. And my own journey proved that self-worth is something no one can take unless you hand it over. Before I close this chapter, let me turn to you, our community here at Her Betrayal Stories. If you were in my place, facing a man who humiliated you before a crowd, what would you have done? Would you forgive him, or would you walk away like I did? Have you ever seen someone in your family suffer the same injustice, being overlooked, disrespected, or mocked? Share your story in the comments, because here, no one suffers in silence. Here, every story is a reminder. You are not alone. And if my journey has touched something inside you, leave a note, not just for me, but for yourself. A promise that you will never again accept less than you deserve. Don't forget to subscribe to Her Betrayal Stories and hit that notification bell. This community is built on sacrifice, betrayal, and those jaw-dropping twists that remind us of justice. Stay with us, because the next story might just echo your own. As I step into each new day, I don't see myself as the woman who was mocked in a bar. I see myself as the woman who walked away, stood tall, and rewrote her own story. And I hope, if you're listening to this now, you know you can too.